Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I thank Sarla Birla University for one creating this excellent platform of exchange of ideas and experiences of corporates with the students. Secondly, I would like to thank Professor Sanjeev Bajaj, who I did not have the good fortune to study under him, but we have a similar association. I graduated from XISS way back. Professor Bajaj came in later, but I have heard rave reviews about Professor Bajaj's capabilities in tying up with academia and the industry. I thank Kavita for giving such a good introduction for about me. I really do not know how much I have done. Uh, and Professor Dr. Saroj Ranjan sir, as we had discussed earlier, I had scrambled up a quick presentation. I thought we'll get little more time to make a presentation. And since I have a small request to whoever is the administrator that someone takes charge of admitting the guests into the discussion. Otherwise, I keep on notifications popping up in my screen to admit them. So someone will have to take that charge and keep on admitting people and don't make them wait in the lobby. I have a small, not really small. I was given 10 minutes time, so I thought let me also make a presentation. The presentation, if I am allowed to make, then I will go ahead do it. Else I can skip that. What I had in mind is one, the student of the current generation. I would like to sensitize them about the kind of speed, the kind of changes, the kind of velocity that is going on around the ecosystem, how the world is changing, what is expected, what is at threat, what are the opportunities. Because merely talking about designing revised curricula all the time might not be the right way of looking at it. You will have to understand things in their 360-degree context as to what has changed, why things are not changing, or what needs to change. So if I am allowed to make the presentation, I can share my screen. I'll take a few minutes for doing that. Is it allowed, Dr. Saroj, sir?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
At the outset, I thank you. I thank Sarla Birla University for giving this opportunity to me, and I for the students and all of you there who has spared the time and logged in. I give a little background of myself. I am from a very small place called Joda where I did my schooling way back in the mid 70s and mid 80s. From there on, I went to St. Ravenshaw College to complete my graduation and had the great fortune of getting entry into XISS after 2 attempts. And after I graduated, started my career with ISA Tractors, moved on to companies like ICI, PepsiCo, ACC, Bennett Coleman and Company. And currently I'm working with the second largest paint manufacturing company in the country, that is Berger Paints as the group HR head. So this is about giving a little bit of perspective to the students as to what is changing and how fast things are changing. Many of you, the students who are currently pursuing their post-graduation might not identify themselves with the pictures on the left, but they will definitely be able to identify themselves on the picture on the right. So why and what does it actually indicate? It indicates that there is a rapid change in the way things are being perceived or looked at. A philosophy of saving money in the 80s actually got flipped and was made to stand on its head when people started appreciating that yes, we need to buy surf because daag lagenge to achhe hain. So just look at the way the mindset had changed. Scooters India, many of you would not have actually seen this Vijay Super Scooter, but this is how the ads looked like in the past, and this is how an ad looks like in the current scenario. Many of you, I do not know whether have the good luck of seeing these colored letter boxes. because we are mostly into Facebook, Flickr, Digg, Rediff, Meetup, MySpace, and so on and so forth. How things have changed? This is the black and white part is where we were when we were, or probably little earlier than our batch when we are into college. But this is how things have changed. So what has changed? If you look at it, the assimilation of technology, the speed at which it has changed. Today we are talking about virtual classrooms. We are in fact doing virtual classrooms. We are doing virtual programs with all of you. We are virtually connected. We are connected from anywhere, and many of us are getting connected all at the same time. Look at the rate or the change of how certain technologies have got consumed and become all in one. So starting from the time when we had walkie-talkies to large handsets to phones with black and white screens, so a little bit of color screens to phones which have actually consumed or eaten away the requirement of a watch, the requirement of a calculator, the requirement of a handycam, the requirement of a camera, and so many other things, in fact, has been consumed, and we are now working or navigating our life with a very small handset, which is controlling everything that we can today think about. So the world is changing. So while it is changing, what is happening? 8 million Americans work as retail salesperson and cashiers. In the future, you really don't need those kind of jobs. In fact, today, many of you might be carrying touchless credit cards or touchless debit cards. So you don't have to wait in the queue and wait for someone to come in, swipe your card. You can just show it and then cross the turnstile. The world is changing. Till few years ago, no one thought that you can actually book a cab on the go at any place at any time during the day at any location. So what has happened is there's a huge amount of disruption of business models which has come from anywhere. Consequently, jobs and careers which appeared to be safe are not so anymore. So this should ring a bell in our head that jobs and careers which appeared safe are not so anymore. Technology is threatening to take away hordes of jobs in almost all sectors. I was listening to our earlier panelists, so they were talking about the kind of development, artificial intelligence and machine learning and the computing abilities that these languages will have. They will completely eliminate the need of humans. So we will have humanoids doing the work of humans, and artificial intelligence software launched themselves to make artificial intelligence software. So AI software, which is currently being done and programmed by human beings, we will have robots actually designing artificial software. I'll just give you a small example as we walk through. A few years ago, I met an entrepreneur in Calcutta. He has devised an app which is to eliminate the role of HR professionals who are into hiring and recruitment. Many of you would know that large corporations like Unilever and all, they have reduced the size of their recruitment team from 33,000 people globally to about 2,100 people all over the world, who manages close to about 50,000 recruitments in a year. So this guy devised a mechanism through an app. He will send you a link. On that link, you will have to answer a few questions. And on the basis of the responses that he will give, he will be able to chart out your competency map. So the competency map, which will then be sent to the employer to match with their requirements. And if the competency map matches with the requirement of the enterprise or the company, so you are a good fit. So it eliminates so many processes in between. So just think about it. What has happened? One, the speed at which it is happening, the computing capability of the system, the requirement of people carrying out this job or doing this job, filing papers, doing pen and paper tests, keeping records for future, pulling them out in future. So all these are sort of eliminated in this kind of a soft app. So let us now come back to where we actually wanted to start. The headlines of interest. We were talking about whether there is a fourth industrial revolution or not. I think that is where our discussion was supposed to arrive at. So if you look at history, how it has evolved over a period of probably 200 plus years, maybe around 300 years. So the early or the first industrial revolution actually was about mechanization replacing human beings who are basically manual or the craft laborers in UK who are eliminated with large scale mechanization happening at the workplace. So what has actually happened, the best example of that period or the first industrial revolution is your steam engine. Particularly the steam engine which improved the way that machines could be operated. So it was never probably thought that you can move from a place A to B unless you have a horse. So this idea, this thought, this perception, or the need of a horse was eliminated by introducing the steam engine. So what eventually happened, a lot of people actually started losing their job, and once people started losing their job, the demand for labor came down, and there was excess supply of labor, and the cost of labor actually came down. The second revolution, industrial revolution, which followed it again, was when there was large-scale labor available with some set of skills or some set of knowledge of working. So industry started ramping up production. So mass manufacturing machines and processes began in the late 19th and mid 20th century. I think most of us would have sort of experienced the digital revolution part, which came on sometime in the late 19th century or early 20th century. Some of us would have, in fact, experienced the Y2K phenomena and so on and so forth. What actually happened? We moved from analog to digital. The World Wide Web got introduced, which connected us globally. Globalization, second half of the 20th century, liberalization of our country's economy, and so on and so forth. The fourth or the final one that we are currently undergoing, although it started way back in 2012 when the World Economic Forum, the founder of WEF, Professor Claus, actually started talking about the need of evaluating this fourth industrial revolution, which was more about cyber physical devices, analytics, Internet of Things, and so on and so forth. So what are the changes that took off? Robotics, automation, autonomous transport, artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. I'll skip this. So let us now come to what does it mean for the students? What does it mean for the academicians as to what is that we need to build in the students into their curricula so that they are industry ready, and then they face the industrial revolution 4.0 in a more meaningful manner. So the skills that are typically required is the learning agility. Today we cannot say that, oh, it has not been taught in our college, so I really do not know as to whether how do I navigate this. So the speed at which you need to learn has now grown manifold. You do not really rely on the textbooks. You will have to rely on multiple sources. It can be peer-to-peer learning. It can be learning from global resources. It can be learning from your faculty. So one part is from where you learn, and how you learn is very important. So when we say where you learn, you either learn in your college, you learn from the net, you learn from your peers, you learn from external resources, so on and so forth. But how you learn, you today really cannot say that I'll take so much of time to learn. You will have to learn fast. Then the way we talk about managing people, about managing change and managing results, there's a huge amount of speed which is actually required. So whether the curricula that we practice in our current setup allows this thing to happen, or it does not allow the thing to happen in that way. That might require a introspection by the academics, whether the current set of curricula needs a revision which matches this requirement, whether my mechanism of delivering lectures or my mechanism of pedagogy or my mechanism of learning is sufficient enough to give that kind of an agility to the students, or we still follow the age-old practice of giving notes and then taking exams on periodic basis and asking students that yes, you have not scored this much, so you do not really pass, you have failed, or so on and so forth. Now more than ever, adaptability in business is critical. Whether we are making people adaptable to the changes through our learnings at the institutions become very important. I remember I think my predecessor only spoke about whether we expose people to real life situations early on in their career, which is very critical to help them build their adaptability capability. So whether we go out and maybe in a cyclone heat area, whether we go out and help people, it is about uh, putting you in a real life situation and a context where your skills are tested, be it your planning, be it your organizing, be it your managing, be it your controlling. So all these PODC skills will get tested there. Then we also heard about the emotional intelligence part, which is really becoming very important these days. So emotional intelligence is a all comprehensive term. It's a single term under which there are few very distinct elements, which is about self awareness, which is about empathy, which is about motivation, which is about self regulation, and which is about social skills. Whether my curricula or the teachings that we have in our colleges encourages people to build this, whether we have real life experiences for people built in into the curricula, which gives them some learning on social skills, some learning on self regulation. I think one of the earliest experience on self regulation is about the marshmallow experience, where children were asked that if you wait for 2 days, you get if you wait for 2 more days, you will get a gift, and if you take the marshmallow right now, you will not get a gift. So it is about self regulation. It is about the emotional intelligence. So can we build in those kind of processes or learnings within our curricula, which helps the students to develop this set of skills? Then do we encourage people to have self-awareness? Why self-awareness is becoming very important these days is once we get into a course like MBA or into BBA or into engineering or into some other professional course, so people need to be aware of their capabilities. There is dog eat dog competition outside. You need to be aware of your capabilities, and unless you are aware of it, or you are really not building on your capabilities. So unless I am shown the mirror, or I myself has the inclination to see the mirror for myself, so I might not develop myself in the desired direction. So that becomes very important. Why empathy becomes more important today? Uh, I think that there cannot be more real life experience than the current situation we are into. So when we see people all around us losing jobs, people losing employment, people doing with half their salary, people doing with one-fourth of their salary, do we empathize with them? Do we feel the pain the way they feel it? So empathy is one critical component of the emotional intelligence. So this is what we need to build in into our learning capabilities. And eventually the conflict resolution part, which I think can be built into the curricula, either through how do people look at difficult situations, how do they present themselves in sort of conflicting positions, So are they assertive enough? Do my uh, do my learning environment or the university environment provide that kind of opportunity for people to be assertive? If you follow the way uh, learnings happen in the Western country and the way it happens in our country, we really do not allow students to be assertive. We tell them that, oh, whatever I'm teaching is the best way. It's either my way or the highway. So we do not allow counter questioning. We do not allow different thoughts being discussed in the classrooms. We sort of do not encourage creative problem solving. Similarly, when we look at the other components about accountability, about empathy, I think mostly the accountability part till our students pass out from the college, they really do not appreciate the need or understand the requirement of being accountable for the outcomes of their action. So they feel that, okay, it is some XYZ's action because in our system, it is mostly the parents who fund the education of students. Uh, or some of them today might be taking kind of loans to subsidize their education. So when this set of people uh, uh, go through a situation where they take loans and then they take help from other sources to fund their education, they really become accountable because they know once I graduate out of this place, I need to pay back the loan. So they become more accountable early on in their career, and that is definitely going to be a good learning. I'll talk a little bit about the learning landscape as it will happen in the future, why and why our curricula needs to undergo a massive change. The availability of learning opportunities outside formal education. So when we are entering a college or an university, we are entering for a formal education, but the availability of learning opportunities outside formal education and training will become especially important for the transition to the labor market. Today, when I go to your campus to select someone, I might not ask you as to what is that you learned in organizational behavior or what is that you have learned in principles of accounting. I probably not ask you to ask you whether you know a trial balance or a balance sheet. I might ask you whether you have read the annual speech of the chairman of ITC. What is that he has been focusing on? So it becomes important for us to allow and encourage students to go out of the formal education track and and assimilate knowledge, learning capabilities from outside. It is actually lying there outside. Today, you really don't have to go to Harvard Business School to understand or read a case study of Harvard Business School. You can, in fact, get it on the go. You can log in into Google and then learn lot about it. Again, the experts are feeling that formal qualifications and degrees will need to be complemented by further training. I heard my predecessor talking about whether we can have labs at the incubation labs, whether you can have learning labs, whether we can have innovation labs. So one very unique example, if the students you must be following, is one of the most innovative companies in the world is 3M. So 3M, if you know, they are the makers of post-its and office stationeries. So they really did not want to make a post-it because they were actually trying to make a glue which will not leave a mark on the wall. So while they were trying various composition of how do we make a glue when it is removed from the wall, does not dirty the wall or it does not leave a mark on the wall, that is how they came, they by chance invented this post-it. And after that, they encouraged people or their employees to get into a innovation mode and allowed people to experiment, allowed people to innovate, allowed people to sort of try wild ideas. So this is something that is expected out of the new employees that will enter into the labor market. So whether you are resourceful, whether you you have that bent of mind to look at things differently. It is not about mostly when we talk about innovation, we think we have a feeling or a thought crosses our mind that, oh, we need to probably make something new. It is not like that. It is about two very elementary things. One is how you look at a problem in terms of what is known as the perspective. How do you look at a problem and how do you solve a problem is what is known as heuristic. So these two elements are to be different. Your ability to look at a problem and solve a problem is what is that is being talked about, is being innovative. Today, when you enter into the job or a job market or any workplace, so people or your seniors would expect you to bring about that element of looking at things differently and solving problems differently is what is innovation. What is going to happen to the learning capabilities or the learning requirement of the students? That is something that the responsibility will today lie with the academicians or the universities and colleges. So you'll have to curate learning for every one of them. When we say curate learning, you have to be, say, focusing on building small modules that helps people to learn about emotional intelligence, helps people to learn about problem solving, helps people to be learning about conflict resolution. You cannot actually create something. You'll have to design everything uniquely for each of the needs. So if you have 10 different students in your class, you might have to create 10 different modules. So you are pulled and accessed by user rather than pushed by the department or your teacher. So you have to be accessed by the user. You have to create such environment where they experience real life situations. Whether my curricula is mostly lecture dominated or oriented, it is a one-way lecture, and professor comes to class, takes out his note, and then starts reading out the notes. So that is what might need a change. You have to give them real life experience. You'll have to take them to places, take them to industry, create maybe labs within your system and encourage them to experience it real life. It has to be today technology driven. I think technology is today given. You cannot deny that we are way behind. We are upgrading or doing this. So it has to be technology driven, and it has to be in the context of the current setting and the forward looking that how things are going to be 25 years down the line. We today cannot rely on the learning of what happened in Ahmedabad spinning mill in the context of industrial relations. That does not make any sense to the students of IR anymore. So it has to be forward looking. When we talk about forward looking, we'll have to talk about things like uh, what is the new generation of workers looking like, what are their bend of mind, what is their background. They're currently third and fourth generation industrial employees. So what are their expectations, what are their background? So we need to learn more about that, those things, rather than what happened in Ahmedabad spinning mill way back in 1911 or 1912. Yes, it does make little sense to be appreciative of that. We today cannot talk about a Factory Act formulated in 1948. We today cannot talk about Workmen Compensation Act made in 1928 or 1948, whether they really make sense to. So how the academia can reorient the learning is very important today. So I just these are some of the markers that I am leaving it for the professors to take it ahead. These are some of the expectations. These are some of the changes which has happened or is happening globally. So if you want students to be more industry ready, students to be more successful, students to be more competent while they go out and face the real world, this is how we need to reorient our curriculum. I think I have taken a little more time than I was allowed to, but I got a little carried away. So this is what I wanted to share with all of you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I am open to take few questions if time permits.
So Good. So I'm asking to Samar Banerjee sir. So talent right now, the Kundan Karan said about the talent management, how to retain the talent with this curriculum, and if we are going to be for redesigning aspects, what types of the things is required to maintain the talent of the students. Being a faculty, I'm also curious about to know from your side, because you are in the industry and we are in the academia. So such type of the gap may be going to be created right now, whatever I have seen. So we are just imparting the knowledge and all these things. So what's your expectations regarding the talent? What types of talent you want for your industry?
Thank you, Dr. Sarojji. So I think most of my predecessors spoke about what kind of talent that we are really looking at. So the talent configuration, if I today look at and state my expectation, one definitely is the mindset part is what most of us were talking about. So when we talk about mindset, what does this mindset actually mean? So mindset or what is the responsibility of the institutes to build that mindset? The mindset is also about two very important things. One is about the adaptability. So how we are looking at things, how we are looking at situations, how do we respond to things and situations is what we actually look for. But if you look for something which can be built into your curriculum is about the emotional intelligence part that I spoke about. So emotional intelligence is one part that we can create that understanding within the students why and how it can be why it is required and how it can be built and developed. Second, we spoke about the adaptability part as to what is that students should be taught and how they should be exposed into such experiential and learning environment where they are open to adapt to new and challenging situations. What people typically would like to say, अरे ये तो हमने पढ़ा नहीं है, ये पढ़ाया नहीं किया है. And finally, what we like to see among people is how resourceful they are. So most of the time people will give excuses कि sir ये नहीं हो सकता है, I do not know, I do not have the resources, I cannot do it. How resourceful they are, how they are able to navigate the challenge is more important. Uh, and one part of the entire conversation which I think the HR practitioners should also have have to be educated, as Subir sir rightly said. So how do we create those kind of ecosystem that they are not only cognitively or physically engaged, they are emotionally also engaged. So how do you define your work systems? How do you define your collaboration platforms? How do you create your reward and recognition mechanism? Even the basic organization structure and design, how it is done that people feel emotionally connected and deliver is very important. And if I go a step behind that, while I am saying that oh, this person does not have the mindset to do the work, who is responsible? You are the person who had gone to the campus and recruited him. You are the person who has created the organization design and structure. You are the person who have created the training platforms, training systems, mechanisms. Now today I cannot come back and say, no, 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 this guy does not have the mindset to work. So it is equally to be blamed to the HR practitioners. That is why I think we are more keen to interact with